Discern Realities, a Dungeon World podcast. My name is David.
And my name is Jason.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right into our first segment. Our first segment is What Happened Here Recently. I've got something that I want to talk about that happened recently, Jason, if that's all right.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so I want to talk about a character that I played that is very near and dear to my heart, and probably near and dear to other people's hearts, and other people just outright hate him. At least their characters do, but I think secretly they love him too.
Okay. I think I know which character you're talking about, but yeah.
Yeah, that pretty much gives it away if you were there. But the character I want to talk about is Pigeonhead.
Right.
Pigeonhead was a ranger, or is a ranger, I suppose, if you believe he's still out there somewhere.
Yeah, I don't think he died or anything. I think he's still around, right?
Yeah, last we saw him, he was sailing off into the sunset. Pigeonhead was a ranger who had his animal companion was this terrible, awful pigeon that was just massive, overweight, wheezing, and it would get sick, and it would eat everything. It was just vile.
Yeah, it was vile. I loved it. And I, as the GM of those games, I always got to play the pigeon, and so I really quite loved that. It was this. It was obviously like supernatural in nature, right? Like that was apparent from just, like just some of its like behaviors. Like it was really, really like overweight, like in a grotesque way that like a normal pigeon wouldn't be able to like survive, It like would eat until it like just vomited, like it would, I remember one distinct, scene where you guys were fighting dire crabs or something like that.
Yeah.
And you guys, and someone like made like a hole in the crab's exoskeleton, and like the pigeon, who was like relatively small at that point, like it was not quite so bloated, like you jammed it into the hole of the dire crab. And the pigeon like ate the dire crab from the inside out.
Yeah.
And couldn't fit out of the hole again. Yeah. It was repellent, and the character was repellent. And Pigeonhead the ranger was really truly just like second fiddle to the pigeon, right?
He really was. He really was.
Well, so yeah, it was an interesting character. Is there something we want to discuss, like in terms of like just gameplay practices or what?
So besides my love for this character, which I could go on and on about, there's something really interesting about this character and in a unique situation that he came from. I didn't actually write this character.
Right, yeah, I forgot about that, yeah. Someone
else started playing Dungeon World for a couple of sessions and had written this character, and then they were no longer able to make the sessions for one reason or another. And I came to the table, and I think you just kind of were like, hey, do you want to play this character? Because I don't think he's coming back. And I was like, sure, this character looks interesting. I can work with this. And it was kind of the best. Like, that was maybe the most fun I've had with any single Dungeon World character.
Yeah, it was super interesting. That is not something that I think a lot of game groups are going to be like cool with doing, right? Like letting another player take over someone else's character because that person can't play them anymore. And also a lot of people are not going to even want to do that, right? Like a lot of people aren't going to want to like take a character that they didn't create initially and then want to play it, right?
Right.
So it's an interesting thing. I think the reason why it was acceptable to our group is because we don't just play Dungeon World, right? We play lots of role-playing games, particularly mechanics light, rules light story games, right? And a bunch of those games we play have like communal characters, right? Like think of The Final Girl or Remember Tomorrow. They have a communal pool of characters, and you're not always just playing the same character all the time. Part of the fun of those games is to see like how other people put a different spin on the character, And so I think that's why, like, as a group, like to us, it just seemed like, yeah, sure, just play that one, right? It's an interesting character. Just do that. So I don't know if like that would translate to other groups, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it would work well or not either, but I know as a GM that I've got like a folder full of characters that I don't think the players are coming back for them. And if I, had someone come in and they weren't really sure what they were doing, I might be comfortable being like, hey, here's a character that's already made, and here's a little bit of the backstory that's going on with them. Do you think you can do that? That way you don't have to like come up with everything on the fly right now. And they might feel a little more comfortable like, oh, okay, that's what I'm doing.
I could see a situation where this would work really well, and I think this has happened over the last few years. I think this is something we've done maybe once or twice, where we have someone who, for whatever reason, they can't be at a session, and so their character might be an important part of the story, or at least it would be difficult to write them out that session, but they can't be there for a certain session. But maybe you have someone else who's there just to try the game out, like they don't, they just want to give it a shot. I think that's a great opportunity to say, hey, why don't you go ahead and just play this guy's character for this session, give them a little breakdown of like kind of what's going on in the story, and then just let them kind of play it as they will. I think in that circumstance, I would probably be a little more lenient on that character. Like I probably wouldn't be as lethal to that character, just because it would be really unfair for someone to have their character be killed, when they're not there. And I would probably also ask that original player if they wouldn't mind sharing the character for a session before I would even do that. But
definitely. Yeah. Maybe it is just the story gamer in me that like accepts switching between characters and not just being married to one character.
Yeah, I think it's just because the Gauntlet's play culture is a little bit more focused around the good of the overall story, and not being so focused on like, I personally have to be the star of the show. Like my character has to be the star of the show. I think that aspect of our play culture is what makes it easy for us to do things like that. So.
Well, I just wanted to mention it and get Pigeonhead's name out there.
I love it. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the next segment. Our next segment is What Should I Be on the Lookout For? Jason, this week, I think what we should be on the lookout for is Perilous Wilds by Jason Lutes.
Yeah, I know of this. I will confess right at the top here that I have not looked at it yet. I own it, but I don't know anything about it. So what is it about?
Okay, so I read through it. I read cover to cover on it, and I love it. It's really, really interesting and a unique take on how to run Dungeon World. So what it does is it creates a very, very well-explained way of doing an adventure campaign that is primarily focused on wandering in the wilderness and just seeking out random dungeons and seeking out random things as you're walking through a land. And it does it in a really, really great way.
Okay, so yeah, how does it work? So
you start off, like session 1, you've got all your players there, and you start making a map. And it has a very, very proceduralized way of making this map so that there are almanacs about each land, and an almanac is not like a book, but it's probably like a note card or a piece of paper. But it's got some like things jotted down about that land that all the players can reference and be like, oh, okay, I know what's generally going on in that land as far as like, it's got this kind of climate, and these are the kind of dangers that are lurking there, and here's like a big town settlement that's there. So you go around the table and you do that, you make your map, and so it kind of has painted the world a certain way already, just because whenever you make a land, it's going to have certain tags that mean, mechanical things for it.
Okay.
And then it ramps up the Undertake a Perilous Journey move a lot. It makes it like 4 or 5 moves instead of just the 1 move.
Okay. All right.
And it really fleshed out. And then it gives you a really good way of randomly generating dungeons and settlements so that you could actually completely improvise an entire campaign. You wouldn't have to necessarily plan a single dungeon or a single settlement. It could all just randomly be generated.
Does it just use tables and stuff, or like how does it work? I mean, what's the...
It does, yeah. It uses a lot of tables, but it uses them in a really clever way, especially for the dungeon creating tables. So whenever you create a dungeon, it's going to randomly have a size associated with it, and randomly have like a peril that is like the chief enemy that's inside of there. Be that a cult or a demon or dwarf constructs or what have you. That's what's going to be the chief thing that's in there. And then it's going to have a number of themes between like, I think 2 and 5 themes. So like, like the demon theme or like a skull motif theme. And whenever like your players are going through the dungeon, anytime that they hit one of those themes, it like checks a box, and you have a few boxes. And once they're all checked, that dungeon is considered completely explored. So,
oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, and it worked. Like, I think it would work really well. I haven't gotten to try it out yet, but I have plans to, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that.
Yeah, I'm excited to try it out. He does say, you could improvise this whole thing, or you could randomly generate between sessions if you're the GM, so that you've got something prepared a little bit better fleshed out and ready to go, so you're not like sitting there at the table rolling a whole bunch.
You know what? Do you know why I like this? I like this because, when I prep Dungeon World, the way I do it is I draw a map, or I make a map, or I have something that kind of stands in for a map. Sometimes it's just like pictures of locations or whatever, right? And then I populate that map, about maybe half of it, or maybe maybe 2/3 or so. I leave a bunch of empty spaces though, as the rules, indicate. But I do have, I've got dangers. There's an adventure front associated with it. And then, I populate the map in a way that I think makes sense based off the environment and stuff like that, right? Now, this is assuming that we're at a position in the story where we can really have they're at a dungeon and we're doing all that, right? Sometimes the first session, I don't even bother with that. I just kind of do more of a perilous journey, getting to know you type session, right? And then we get to the dungeon the next session. But in any case, the reason why I like this Perilous Wilds thing, as you've described it, is I think a lot of GMs have a hard time doing this on the fly, right? I think they have a hard time putting together their own dungeons, which is why they rely on supplements. But the difficulty of running a module dungeon is if you don't know it really instinctively, if you don't understand it really instinctively, you're going to have a hard time making that flow happen at the table, because you're always going to be referring to things. So if you've made the dungeon on your own, then you kind of understand your dungeon at a more instinctive level. And so you can kind of adapt and adjust as needed and kind of keep the pace going, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not good at doing that, if you don't have a lot of experience putting together dungeons, having a tool like this seems like it'd be really cool.
Yeah. I'm excited to try it out. And I'm pretty intimidated with the idea of making my own dungeons. So this really sang for me.
No, yeah, I love some of the underlying concepts, like the idea of tying the dungeon to a theme. I think that's a beautiful idea, because I do that as part of my dungeon prep. I do that, right? I have a motif, right? I have a theme that I want to explore in the dungeon, and I don't have it set out in stages, of thematic discovery, like this book seems to, the way you've described it. But I'm with that underlying idea. I don't like a dungeon that's just a bunch of random wandering monsters in geometrically arranged corridors, right?
Right.
I want there to be a theme that kind of binds it all together, right? So
right.
Yeah, it's cool idea. Cool. I can't wait to check it out. It seems pretty neat.
Yeah, and it gets even deeper and deeper. The more you rely on the tables, it can really give you a ton of information about the dungeon if you let it. Or you can, and this is what he suggests, is as soon as you have a picture in your mind of what the dungeon is now, just cut it off and be all right, now I know what's going on here.
Awesome. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it does that for the monsters, it does that for settlements, it does that for NPCs. It has really, really good world generating ideas behind it, and I think it's really cool.
Cool. Awesome.
All right, well, let's move on to the next segment. Our next segment is What Here Is Not What It Appears to Be. Jason?
I want to talk about unarmed combat. So I was recently looped into a G+ conversation, a post on G+. The original post was a person asking about unarmed combat and how much damage does unarmed combat do. And if it's just class damage, why do we have weapons, and why do we have moves like disarm? What's the point of these things if you can just use your fist to deal your class damage, right? So the conversation that took place in the thread was really good, and I didn't have much to add to it, if I'm being honest, because a lot of people covered it pretty well. But I thought it would be good to just kind of do it on the show. So for people who may not have seen that thread, yeah. So unarmed combat. In fact, if you're using your fists and you are able to inflict damage on whatever you're attacking, the damage is just your class damage, D8 for thieves, D10 for fighters, or whatever it is, right? The question in the OP was, well, then what's the point of having weapons, right? And like, like what's the point of disarming, people if you don't, if they can just use their fists to attack you? The answer is pretty straightforward. It's like, it's always the answer in Dungeon World, which is, weapons give you different fictional circumstances, right? And the fictional circumstances are what's really important here, right? Just because you're attacking something with your fists doesn't mean you automatically get the right to deal damage, right? It's going to depend very, very much on the circumstances of the fiction. So consider this. If there is a guy with a pike or a spear, right? Trying to like keep me at bay. Maybe he's got some armor on, and I have a sword, I'm going to have a much better chance. It makes more sense that I'd be able to get inside of his spear and actually hit him with the sword than I would be with my fists, right? So that's kind of like what the difference a weapon makes, right? Like in the first instance of if it's just, if I have my sword, I would probably just go ahead and make that hack and slash, right? Especially if the person narrated like getting inside the spear. But in the second instance, it would be a different situation, right? I think a person just with their fists would have to get past the spear first, right?
Right.
So that's kind of like the easy example. Let's talk about the situation in which you have a PC fighting something like, say, an Umber Hulk. Okay, an Umber Hulk, classic D&D monster. It's a large insectoid biped. It has mandibles and sharp claws, right? And importantly, a very heavy like exoskeleton, right? Let's say the PC rushes up to Umber Hulk with just his fists, and is going to try to hurt the Umber Hulk by just punching the Umber Hulk. I think in that circumstance, that's golden opportunity, and I don't let the PC roll anything. I don't let the player roll shit, and I just have the Umber Hulk hurt them, right? Because to me, and I think the table would agree, it doesn't make any sense that a person with their fists would be able to run up to this like creature that has heavy plates of exoskeleton and punch them and hurt them, right? So that's one circumstance. But let's say instead the player narrates the PC using their bare hands to get into the Umber Hulk and like gouge their eyes out with their fingers, right? Like take their thumbs and fingers and gouge the Umber Hulk's eyes out. That's a different situation, right? In that circumstance, it's probably a defy danger, with the win result being I blind the Umber Hulk, right? And the failure result being, really anything, I suppose, but probably whatever the Umber Hulk would, like do in response, like attack the guy or whatever, right? So that's, so see how it's a little different by reframing like how the person like approaches their attack, so to speak, with their bare hands. It changes things, right? Imagine you had a circumstance where there are some sharpened spikes on a wall nearby, okay? If I narrate my PC using my hands to grab the Umber Hulk and push the Umber Hulk into the spikes, well, again, we look at the fictional circumstances. If I'm a big, muscular PC, then that's probably hack and slash, right? As I'm trying to like hurt the Umber Hulk, and the Umber Hulk can still hurt me, right? My weapon is just me like pushing the Umber Hulk into the spikes. If I am a halfling, it's probably nothing, right? I think like a halfling trying to like rush up with their little hands and push a giant, 8-foot tall Umber Hulk into the spikes. The Umber Hulk would probably just ignore the halfling, right? He'd probably be focused on the human fighter, right? Like, so it's a different circumstance, right? If, though, the Umber Hulk is not paying attention, like he's distracted, and you see an opportunity to rush up and push him into the spikes, then I think it's a little different. Then I think it doesn't matter how big the PC is, right? Because they have like a bit of a fictional advantage on the Umber Hulk. So ultimately what I'm getting at is you need weapons. Weapons don't, or being able to use your fists theoretically to hurt something does not obviate the need for weapons, because the fictional circumstances are quite different, right?
Yeah, I think that there's something really important here that we're kind of dancing around, and that's the fact that like it's on the GM to call out when moves are happening. It's not for the players to say, "Oh, I'm hacking and slashing by attacking with my fists."
Absolutely, right. Absolutely, yeah. Of course, like the players should always just be narrating what their guy does, and then if it triggers a move, it triggers a move, right? And that's for the GM to say. Dungeon World 101, you don't get to just say, I walk into the room and discern realities, right?
Right.
You have to like describe what you're doing, right? I thought of one other circumstance to kind of put a little extra wrinkle on this PC Umber Hulk, bare-fisted PC versus Umber Hulk thing. So if the PC was a monk, like a fighting monk, And he used like the power of martial arts or his chi or whatever. You know, his punches like send like some kind of mystical force energy or something, you know, like if that's how we understand the PC, then I think that's a little different circumstance. I think maybe in that case, maybe that monk can hurt the Umber Hulk with his punches, right? But if it's just a guy who's good at martial arts and he just happens to be very good at punching things, I think that's, again, I don't think he hurts the Umber Hulk in that case. I think the Umber Hulk tears him up.
All right, well, let's move on to the next segment. Our next segment is What Here is Useful or Valuable to Me. Jason, what do you got for us this week?
So this week, we have 5 magic items for the segment, okay? Now, the text is pretty short on all of them, so it's not like, you know, we're not going to take 30 minutes on this, but 5 magic items. These are part of a collection that was created by our friend, Daniel Fowler. And when I say they're a collection, it means that they're all connected to this one, like, fictional group of monks that you can kind of airdrop into your game if you wish. I quite like them. I think that thematically, the items all sing really well together, and I just think the theme of this package is very just evocative and lovely and good. So the collection's called The Keepers of the Unquiet Dead, and I'm just going to straight read the text here. The Keepers of the Unquiet Dead are an order of monks dedicated to pacifying and securing the undead. Their temples contain vast tombs where they collect and care for the ones who cannot find peace. Above all, they honor who the undead were in life, providing comfort to creatures others fear and seek to destroy. Many years of devoted practice have allowed them to develop tools for safely handling their charges. Okay, I just love that. I think that's so evocative and lovely.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
The first item is called the Life Song Flute. The Life Song Flute is fashioned from 5 pipes, each shaped into the likeness of a man at different stages of his life, from a small boy to an elderly gentleman. When played, the flute produces a music that is at first happy and excited, then fierce and noble, and finally solemn. Undead will be transfixed by the music and will simply stand and stare so long as it is playing. So I think it's pretty nice. Do you want to read the next one?
Yeah. The next item is Grave Root Powder. This powder is made from a special plant that roots in grave soil. A pinch on the wind will attract any undead creature. If you lay down a trail, undead of lesser intelligence will be compelled to follow it.
Awesome. The next one is called Robes of Perilous White. The Keepers of the Unquiet Dead take great care to keep their clothing completely free of stains. In fact, their hooded robes are so pristinely white they seem to glow by twilight. Undead eyes cannot perceive this peerless white, making the wearer invisible to them. Undead of higher intelligence may still be able to detect a wearer of the robes through other means.
The next item is Mirror of Lost Days. This simple mirror shows the undead a reflection of their former life. Intelligent undead will be fascinated by the reflection and can be safely conversed with while they admire it.
Nice. And the final one is called the Torch of Final Rest. These torches are made from the wood of ash trees sacred to the Keepers of the Unquiet Dead. The wood is only cut after the tree dies, a rare enough occurrence that the monks set it aside for their most solemn ritual, putting the undead to their final rest. Any undead creature that cannot be pacified or saved will be burned on a pyre. If the pyre is lit by one of these special torches, the undead will peacefully accept its fate. So, yeah, I think these are great. I just love these items. I love this collection. I think it's very dark and evocative. I think Fowler's done a really, really good job with this. And you could fashion a whole adventure around this order. Your characters could be members of the order. There's all kinds of different things you could do with this. And importantly, what I love about it, just as an old school fantasy guy who loves, or I should say is very familiar with the tropes of like D&D style fantasy. Normally when we see like religious types or magic types dealing with the undead, they're usually necromancers or evil priests who like raise the undead, or they're good priests or clerics who like destroy the undead because they're vile and wicked, right? I love the tone and the theme of this set, which is like we empathize with the undead, right? And we want to give them peace. I think that's just a lovely touch. So,
yeah, Yeah, I really feel like I understand the Keepers of the Unquiet Dead through the items in this collection, and that's really, really great work from Fowler.
Yeah, it's super cohesive. It's lovely. Really good stuff.
And let's move on to the next segment. Our next segment is What is About to Happen.
Okay, so when we last saw Ramshackle Crow, he was trying to pick the lock on this door in this series of connected hallways underneath the Temple of the Perilous Star. He was in the middle of working on that lock when someone opened the door into the space that he's in and is entering, right? We don't know who it is yet, so that's where we're picking up, okay?
All right.
So you've heard you heard like kind of the clang and grind of the door, like moving off out of the frame, or out of its, the door frame, and the door is opening up. I will tell you that you will notice, you'll get a glimpse of who's coming in before they actually come in, right? It's Urbina Castafiel, the woman who previously you had encountered, who had followed you into the temple and who tried to knock you out with Tagit oil. It's Urbina Castafiel. Now, here's the thing, though. You know about that pressure plate trap just inside the room?
Yeah.
And she may not. What do you do?
Oh, man. No, she was trying to knock me out. Fuck her. Like,
wow, okay. All right.
No, I can't do it.
So you are going to warn her or not warn her?
It's like Sophie's Choice.
Is it?
No, it's not. It's not. Yeah, I'll tell her.
What do you say?
Okay, so I come over cool, calm, collected, and I gently push back on the door and I say, hold on 1 second.
But what do you mean, hold on 1 second? Who is Ramshackle? Is that you?
Yes, it's me. Haha, I bet you didn't expect to see me here.
She's like, well, I had a suspicious feeling, but I didn't think you would... I thought I'd let you go far enough ahead of me. I didn't think you'd be right here in the room. Let me in, please?
All right, milady, but be careful to watch your step. There is a trap just on the other side of this door.
She's like, oh, very good catch. You'll see at this point as she steps into the room that she's no longer wearing like the tattered robes of the vagrant person that she was trying to pretend to be. Now she's in kind of adventuring gear or adventuring outfit, right? She has like a vest and a shirt and like traveling pants and boots and that sort of thing, right? She probably just looks like she just cast off the tattered robes, right?
Sure.
She comes in and she says, well, this looks like the place. What do you think?
I should think so. Mind the pit over there. There's something down there. I'm not quite sure what. So can we be friends now that you've tried and failed to poison me and I've successfully helped you across this dangerous threshold?
She says, I do have to admit I find you most intriguing. I certainly didn't expect you to be able to defeat my Tagit oil. How did you manage that?
Tricks of the trade, milady. A true master never reveals their secrets.
There may be something to you after all. You might be an uncut, slightly cloudy diamond in the rough, so to speak.
Your compliments flatter me.
Oh, good. I meant to. She walks over to the grate, and she looks down, and she says, what do you think is down there?
I don't know, but I saw it. I saw something moving, and I've got no reason to go down there. Do you?
She's like, well, I'm looking for something that may or may not be kept in the vault, if this is the vault. And she looks, and if you recall from last session, I described that this room that you guys are in has two corridors going off of it, one to the north and one to the east, right? And she says, but I have to imagine that down one of these ways is probably what you're looking for. And she turns and she says, look, I'm willing to work with you, but only under the condition that if we find your Heartstone gem, then you have to help me find my mirrored egg. And if we find the mirrored egg first, then I will help you find the Heartstone gem. But in any case, once we're finished. That's it.
Oh, no holding hands and running off into the sunset?
Tempting though it is, she says as she looks you up and down.
Yeah, as I leer with my, yellow teeth.
Yeah, exactly. She doesn't seem too impressed, but she is kind of secretly impressed that you managed to defeat her poison, right? She says, so then, where shall we start?
Do you think that your treasure is down that pit? Because if we have to go down there, I'd rather get it over with sooner rather than later.
She's like, I don't have any reason to necessarily think it is, but I do think it's a possibility. I should tell you a little bit more about what I'm looking for. I'm looking for an egg that looks like mirrored glass, but this is not something that was constructed by human hands. This is an actual egg. It's an egg of a rare serpent known as the Starlight Serpent, and I happen to think that possibly the Temple of the Perilous Star has one of these specimens, and possibly one of these eggs.
So you're talking about trying to steal an egg from a nest from a giant serpent that
I didn't say it was a giant serpent, but it is in fact a giant serpent.
Of course it's a giant serpent. What else? What other kind of serpent would lay such precious eggs?
Well, I don't know anything about serpents, but I do know that, generally speaking, but I do know that this serpent is a big one.
Well, I know there's something big and moving down the hole, so that's probably your serpent. I don't know if the nest is down there or not, but I imagine it probably is.
And she kind of walks over to the one of the wall, and she kind of leans up against the wall and kind of crosses her arms and says, "I'll let you take the lead. Where do we go, oh captain, my captain?"
I like it when you call me that.
She's like, she rolls her eyes.
Yeah. All right. Well, since we're going to try and steal something from a dangerous creature, let's put that as the second part of our foray. Let's go ahead and let's go down this passageway, indicating the east one.
She's like, all right. And then she heads down there with you. I think we cut there.
Yeah. All right. Let's go.
Before we wrap up, just mechanically, I think Urbina will be a hireling.
Okay.
Her stats, and you can note this whenever you have time. Her stats are going to be, she has loyalty 0, she has burglar 2, and warrior 1.
All right. Well, that just leaves our final question, Jason. Who's really in control here?
That would be the Gauntlet Gaming Community, which can be located on G+. Just go to G+ Communities and search for the Gauntlet. You will find us there. We also run lots of games on Hangouts. We organize them through Meetup. Go to our community page again and find the link to our Meetup and sign up for one of our games. We're on Twitter at Gauntlet RPG. And one little special request, if you have a minute, listener, and you like our show, you should go to iTunes and give us a review, preferably a 5-star review. Those reviews are really important because it's how people find us if they are just searching for, say, role-playing games or fantasy or Dungeon World, right? Where they're more likely to find us the more reviews we have. And this is not just true in iTunes. This is true in any of the podcast apps. They all pull iTunes data. So if you could go help us out with that, that would be awesome. But yeah, that's it.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks, Jason.
You are welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, listeners. That's our show.
Part of me wishes that Pigeonhead was substituted for Ramshackle Crow in a way. You know?
Oh my God!
I think we'd be getting a very, very different kind of experience. I think. But,
yeah, I know. Why'd you have to bring that up? Now I'm like, oh man. That would be very interesting. Maybe season 2.
Yeah, possibly.